let's kick off with our first fireside chat for this session. It's with Anthony Weirden from Virgin Money. And thank you so much, Anthony, for stepping in at very short notice. We appreciate that. And also Sanjay Gupta, who's from Mitek Systems. So please, give them your biggest, heartiest welcome. Come on. I've had to rouse them up, you see, because they're not very good at sharing applause. They're getting there, though, so thank you.
I was happy enough with that.
That's fantastic. OK, look, guys, it's very good to see you. OK, let's get down to it, so to speak. And I want to start first with the basics, because we hear this word agile, or the variation agility, thrown into conversations a great deal, along with the word resilient. What I want to know from both of you is what it means. And do you think the idea of what agile and resilient have actually evolved since COVID-19? So we've had one definition perhaps to be replaced by another. So Anthony, if we can start first with you, and then Sanjay.
Yeah, thanks, Julia, and pleased to be here. So I think for me, if I think about agility and resilience, I think they're two sides of the same coin in a great many respects. I think agility or being able to deliver change or transform in an agile way is about pace. It is about iteration. And I think for a lot of colleagues who aren't used to working in that way, actually working like that, learning to fail fast, to understand when it's important to change direction, actually builds a great deal of personal resilience. So I think they're two sides of the same coin.
Is that your take, Sanjay?
Yeah, I think we can add to that where if you extend that to businesses, right? Businesses need to be agile. They need to be able to adapt to not only the threats that they're seeing, but also there's market dynamics that are happening. And additionally, consumer behavior is changing. So if you just look through the pandemic, what's happened, you know, there was a lot of banks that were closing their branches. So if they weren't already moving to the digital channel, they had no choice. So, you know, you guys might tell I'm not from around here, I'm from the US. So in the US, we saw quite a bit of banking operations where there were big banks that we were dealing with, they were refusing to adopt and go to the digital channel. But during this pandemic time period, they really had no choice, and they accelerated their innovation and capability to be able to offer, you know, products to consumers so they can onboard faster.
Stay with me on the business lexicon, Sanjay, because another word, which is a favourite, is flexibility. In fact, it's a key word for this particular topic that we're discussing. What steps, from your perspective, should banks be taking to ensure that their systems and processes are flexible enough to adapt to change at speed?
So I think there's really three different parameters you got to look at, right? You have to look at the processes that are already in place. If you have old processes that are there, no matter how fast you want to go, those processes are going to hinder you. So you have to look at what SLAs are you trying to achieve, not only to the end consumer, but also internally. Then you have to look at the people that you have. So the individuals may not be ready to adopt these processes and move forward. And kind of to Anthony's point, sort of like, then you worry about the technology. You know, which technology can you tie all those three together to make the changes that are necessary, and then be able to be resilient and to go fast. Without all those three kind of working in harmony, you'll get stuck.
Okay, which leads to my next point, and that is agile methodologies and how you go about implementing them. I mean, look, talk us through this. What are these agile methodologies, and how different are they to what is currently being implemented?
For me, Sarah.
You can pass it on to him if you want.
No, I mean, I think Anthony will probably have a different viewpoint. The way I look at Agile is, you know, I'm a product guy, so my background is product and corporate development. And from a product perspective, there are very, very strict terms. You got Scrum, you got Kanban, you got all these, but forget about all that. It's really how fast can you innovate? You design a little bit, take it to market, and then iterate. Hey, is that product that you just released, is it being taken by consumers? Are they getting value out of it? If they are, great, you probably hit something that's very valuable. If you haven't, you need to be able to make changes, and make changes fast, not in months, but we're talking weeks. So I think those are the kind of the elements that I would look for.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony, it's very easy to describe it in that way, the way that Sanjay has, and it sounds very easy, but look, there is no pain without gain here. So what are the typical barriers that banks encounter when they're trying to implement these agile methodologies. And when you decide you want to go down that road, do you do it company-wide, or is it best to roll it out across differentiated teams? I mean, what are the practical tips on this? Because I'm sorry, but it sounds like walking through a field of treacle.
Yeah. So I mean, I agree. I think to really embed any agile culture, it has to be enterprise-wide. So I think, as Sanjay described, you can establish an agile change methodology, which has quite a sort of prescribed set of sort of behaviours, ways of working, those types of things. I think what's a greater challenge is ensuring that organisations are agile enough in the whole to take advantage of the things that are being delivered through an agile methodology. So if you're delivering a new feature a week or a robot a week, but you're actually only, doing marketing updates to customers once a month, that's obviously too slow. Similarly, if your finance and HR processes can't keep up with the pace of delivery from an agile methodology, then you're hamstrung by that. So I think it's really, really important not just to establish an agile delivery methodology, but actually an agile culture, sort of enterprise-wide, to really, really maximise the benefits of agile.
Okay, stay with me on this, Anthony. Let's focus on the idea that we have achieved the perfect agile methodology. It does what it says on the packet. But what about the risk? Okay, you can't exclude that, because look, it's a fast-changing environment. The risk element is always developing. What are these key risks that you need to focus on in that agenda?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, so as I mentioned earlier, a lot of Agile is about iteration, it's about trying things. Things don't work in its own right. That presents sort of a level of risk. I think what Sanjay said earlier about sort of trying to ensure that the way you measure success is as customer-centric, as sort of outcome-focused as possible is really how I think you get around that. So, you measure your customer outcomes not necessarily on the success of each individual sprint that you've run, but actually in aggregate in terms of how they're improving outcomes for customers and also outcome for colleagues.
And let's stay with the idea of risk, Sanjay, because look, this is all happening. This conversation itself is happening in a digital landscape that is constantly evolving. What we talked about half an hour ago has probably moved on half an hour later. It is that rapid. But how can banks effectively manage emerging risks with ecosystem partners, for example? And that's just one example, because again, there's a lot of talk about partnering, the pros and the cons, more pros than cons, but again, you cannot escape the risks.
Absolutely. I mean, so if I was a bank, which I'm not, we're on the vendor side of the house. We supply product to banks so they can be successful in their digital transformation. So I would look for a partner that's transparent. We're a publicly traded company, so you can look at all of our finances. We file every quarter, so you know what's going on. But then there's more to that. There's transparency around your finances, but then there's transparency around how data is being consumed internally. We're dealing with, PII or privately, individually identified information that's critical, that's consumer data that we're dealing with. So the ecosystem partners that you're dealing with, they have to be very transparent as to the life cycle of that data. How are you using it? How long are you retaining it? For what purposes are you using it? And then are you putting it away at the right time? Additionally, what's going on is that more and more banks are asking for what's called model governance. How did you develop the algorithms, and are these outcome-based algorithms? What data did you use? You have to be transparent on that. What biases are all these algorithms giving out? How did you test these algorithms? So all of these things are table stakes in order for you to manage your risk, but also find the right ecosystem partner that you actually want to work with.
We can talk about biases for ages, but we're going to avoid that for the moment. But we get the sense of it. But look, Anthony, let's take it back to resilience, something that we referenced at the beginning of this conversation. Because look, in a nutshell, it is all about the ability to tolerate, adapt and recover. That's the consensus. But what are the considerations when you are designing robust operational business and continuity plans?
Yeah, so I think to a certain extent, Agile and working in a more digital world has given us given us and our partners some sort of inbuilt resilience, if you like. We're now, more flexible in terms of sort of physical premises and stuff. We've de-risked some of the big risks that sit around that to a certain extent. But as you say, some new risks have emerged. I think the top one I would call out at the moment is colleague well-being. So we've shifted to working from home in the pandemic or largely working from home or working flexibly. But I still manage a large number of people, and their well-being is really important. It's more difficult to check on it.
Sure.
So at Virgin Money, for example, we've rolled out a whole new colleague proposition. It's called Life More Virgin, which is focused on really ensuring that colleagues can make the most of flexible working, looking at shift patterns, but also make sure that they can really get their work-life balance right, recognizing that they don't have the in-office support network they had. So I think there are other risks that have emerged over the last couple of years, but I think colleague well-being in particular is right at the top of my agenda.
And that's important, really, Sanjay, when you look at technology and business strategy teams, because look, they need to work together to create a successful business continuity plan. How do you achieve that, given that obviously COVID-19 disrupted everything? A lot of people are still working away from the office, away from that support network that Anthony actually referenced there. So, but is there scope for improvement when we talk about that successful business continuity plan, getting everybody on board?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know how many organizations actually have a business continuity owner. Who owns that plan? And how often do you review it? How often do you say you have to actually, try it out? Like we just talked about earlier, if there's a fire alarm, we got to sit here, right? That's a business continuity plan for what we're doing today. Same thing, so we have a team of about 170 agents. And during this pandemic, prior to the pandemic, we had put a business continuity plan to say, well, how do we continue our service, not for what actually happened in terms of the pandemic, but if that building was on fire, how are these agents still going to be able to process documents that are critically important for somebody that's just filed, to get their unemployment insurance? So you have to think about the customer first. What is it that you are trying to serve up to that customer? Because people are resilient, right? People will find a way to survive. And if you offer them the right services, they'll go towards it. So I think you got to have an owner. You have to make the investment as a business. You have to really make the investment to say that this is critically important, and you have to test yourself periodically.
Sure. And bearing that in mind, Anthony, how does company culture fit into that? And to what extent do you think a digital culture needs to be cultivated first so that you can have that robust agility and resilient operations to follow?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think it does need to be kind of cultivated up front and if you like, sort of woven through everything that you do. It can't be another thing on top of your existing agenda. It needs to be a key part of everything you do. I think on the sort of business continuity point, I mean, one of the things we've been focusing on is trying to be really, really clear what our critical processes are. And as Sanjay said, using customer insight to understand even within those critical processes, where are the real customer sensitivities? So potentially for payments, for example, it might be more obvious if a payment doesn't arrive, that's bad. But if you look at, say, opening a mortgage, for example, is it getting an offer quickly? Is it the actual, what happens post-offer? Is it actually getting the right advice and products up front? So where are those sensitivities and how do you build resilience around those? I think is really, really important, and that's a part of our culture every day and everything we do.
I mean, guys, sadly, time has gone against us, but thank you so much for sharing your insights on this, because look, it's really important if you actually want to have that resilience, the resilience, the flexibility and the agility. It has to be approached from a position of sincerity. It's got to be holistic. It has to take the customer into account, but also the people who will be implementing these programs as well. Hence, and I'm glad, in fact, Anthony, that you stressed the importance of well-being. There's continuity from that post-COVID-19, but gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your contribution. It's brilliant.